We get a roll.
I do the roll call.
Go for it.
Chair Harris is absent. Vice Chair Lardy is present. Board Member Clampett. Present. Board Member Gong.
Present.
Board Member Meyer.
Present.
Board Member Morgan.
Present.
Board Member Williams.
Present.
All right, all other members are present.
Present.
Secretary Karen.
Oh, they skipped. Don't take it first.
I did notice it was restructured, so many of you put Cynthia up top, so.
The Resiliency Advisory Board acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of the Kumeyaay, Luisenia, Kupino, and Kaliua tribes. Today, the Kumeyaay people continue to maintain their political sovereignty and cultural traditions as vital members of the San Diego community. We are honored to share this space with them, and we thank them for their stewardship. All right, moving on to agenda item number 3. Are there any modifications to the agenda order recommended by any board members or staff?
No.
Okay.
I have a staff announcement update. So it was requested for an update on the De Natural Amendment. So the staff update for that is at the end of September 2024, the California Coastal Commission sent the city a letter stating that the De Natural Amendment to the Mission Bay Park Master Plan and Local Program Land Use Plan have been deemed incomplete and non-filed. The letter cited 3 reasons for this: 2 related to information regarding public input and interested party lists, and 1 related to additional requested technical analysis in the areas of hydrology and water quality. It's the technical analysis portion that has delayed the response to the California Coastal Commission non-filing letter. The city has been collecting additional information and assessing how best to respond to the request for detailed project level technical analysis on a long-range planning document. A response to the non-filing letter and a meeting with California Coastal Commission staff to discuss in greater detail is planned for late spring.
There are announcements. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 5, the consideration and approval of the minutes from April.
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Motion to approve by board member Meyer, second by board member Morgan. Any comments? All in favor? All right, all voted in favor. We will move to non-agenda public comment.
So we have no attendees in person. For virtual non-agenda public comment, you can raise your hand either by tapping the raise your hand button on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, or by dialing *9 on your phone. You'll be taken in the order in which you raise your hand. You may only speak once for the non-agenda public comment. When the chair indicates it is your turn to speak, click the unmute prompt that will appear on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, or dial *6 on your phone. Do we have any non-agenda public comment? See.
Then we will move on to item number 7, unfinished business, resiliency topic, presentation by the SoCal Heat Hub and extreme heat research by Maren Hale.
Great, okay, should I join from my computer or? I'm not sure how to.
Can I don't know if you have fancy animations.
Nope.
Okay, then if you just wanna, you can take over my seat and you can click through. Let me just reshare. So everyone can see. Should be for you. Yeah.
Wait, and should I just use the keys to?
Yeah, you can use the keys, or if you want to do your like cursor is right there, you can like.
Oh, I see. Great. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, and it's 1:07, so I don't go over time. Hi, everyone. My name is Marin Hale. I'm the project manager for the SoCal Extreme Heat Research Hub. I'm covering for Mark Merrifield, who's the Hub PI. I know he was gonna give this presentation last time, but then he couldn't make it today. But I'm happy to talk about our research today. Let's jump right into it. I'm actually gonna, so let me try quickly. I'm actually gonna skip these first two slides, which just talk about climate change in general and how it's happening in San Diego and in California as well. Because I want to be able to spend a few minutes on this slide. So this is a map of land surface temperature averaged over several summers in San Diego region. On this map, the darker purple areas represents relatively cooler temperatures, and the yellow is the hottest areas. So I just wanted to give everyone here a chance to look at this, and if you have any comments or observations about what you're seeing here about the pattern of temperatures, feel free to raise your hand or just blurt out any observations you have about this map.
Well, I have one question, but I see it's answered there.
Yes.
Over what was the time period? You said average, and it looks like it's
Yes.
5 years.
Average over 5 years, just the summer months, and it's land surface temperature. So it's measured by satellite of the actual temperature of the surface of the Earth as opposed to the air temperature.
So is that coastal areas and then high elevation is the coolest? Is that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So you can definitely see that it's cooler near the coast. So proximity to water has a big effect on temperature. And then also a great observation about the elevation. So you can see the canyons really clearly here. You can see the canyons as well as the San Diego River as well, which is kind of in a canyon or valley. So proximity to water, vegetation. So I think it's more about the shade and vegetation in those canyons as opposed to the elevation itself that helps those regions stay cooler. Any other observations?
I mean, you can clearly see the mid-city and El Cajon Boulevard through there with much more buildings, much less overhang. And then a cluster really around Montgomery Field. You can see all the airports pretty good, but around Montgomery Field and the industrial Kearney Mesa area.
Yeah, totally. I think it's so interesting how you can see specific streets here. So you can absolutely see El Cajon Boulevard, you could see University. The highways show up really clearly as hotter, as well as, like you pointed out, airports, San Diego Airport, you got the Naval Air Base, Miramar, industrial areas, the Port of San Diego is hotter, Kearney Mesa. Yeah, all super great observations. Yeah.
And in terms of cooler, all of our open space,
Yes.
much of our open
Yeah,
space.
Balboa Park shows up here.
Yes. It's awesome. I had a bullet point list of all the things I wanted to hit on, and you hit all of them in order.
Wow.
So the parks are also sort of cool islands. Balboa Park, maybe the most obvious one there. It's that big square, but even smaller parks. So I live in North Park, and you can see a little tiny rectangle, which is like the closest park to me. That's North Park Community Park. Parks all over the city are definitely cool islands. So the point of this slide, aside from being a fun icebreaker interaction, is just to demonstrate that extreme heat is extremely unevenly distributed across a city like San Diego. And that's influenced by lots of factors like vegetation, urbanization, proximity to water. And these are things that our heat hub is investigating. And in addition to the patterns of extreme heat, we're looking at how those patterns affect people and what we could do to intervene upon these and hopefully improve and make the distribution of heat less uneven. All right, so what's the heat hub? So we're a research team focused on the topic of extreme heat in coastal Southern California. headquartered at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, but we also have partners at USD. And we are a transdisciplinary convergent research hub. So convergent meaning we have people working on one issue, extreme heat, but from multiple backgrounds or scientific disciplines. And we co-produce knowledge with our stakeholders and partners. That's a big aspect of all NSF Coastlines and People projects. So that's our funding source is the National Science Foundation's Coastlines and People program, which supports research hubs that study interactions between natural, human-built, and social systems in coastal populated environments. There's several hubs across the US. Some are studying things like sea level rise or earthquakes, but ours is looking at extreme heat. All right, so today I'm gonna talk for the rest of the presentation about our 5 theme areas and what each of them does with a couple examples from each of work that's been completed so far. So we have 3 research themes, and those are shown in green circles here. We have just a Venn diagram to visualize the structure of our hub because the research from each area is intended to inform the research from other areas. So our 3 science teams are atmosphere, land, ocean dynamics, public health, epidemiology, and environmental justice, and then ecohydrology and sustainable greening. But encompassing the 3 research areas, we also have 2 broader themes of education and community engagement. So I'm going to talk about each of these, starting with atmosphere, land, ocean dynamics, which is being led by several researchers at Scripps, Sasha Gershinov, Kristen Gergis, Rachel Klemesha, and Mark Merrifield. So this team is looking at ocean, atmosphere, and land processes and how those affect extreme heat in coastal Southern California and how those will be affected by climate change. So we're using observational studies as well as modeling studies, looking at factors that influence extreme heat, including the ocean, clouds, and atmospheric circulation. So just a quick example of some work from this theme area that we released last year. We looked at the connections between terrestrial and ocean heating. So there were a lot of different things that this paper looked at, but one very clear outcome is the connection between summer heat wave days and then summer heat wave days in the coastal zone on land and temperatures in the ocean, which are quite closely related. Kind of probably to be expected, but it's interesting to see how highly correlated those are. Another paper that came out a couple years back from Rachel Klemesha was looking at how the North American monsoon affects coastal low clouds. And low clouds are a really important factor influencing the patterns of extreme heat in Southern California. So she found that the monsoon helps to break up the May gray and June gloom and help bring about the sunny temperatures that we're known for in the summer. Compared to Northern California, where they don't really have as much influence from the North American monsoon, and if you've ever been to San Francisco in July, you know it can still be quite cold and cloudy up there, even throughout the summer. All right, so our next research theme is public health, epidemiology, and environmental justice, led by Tariq Ben Marnia. And his team is looking at the locally specific health impacts of extreme heat and how they vary according to land use and socioeconomic factors. So if you think of the activity we did at the beginning with that map, that includes things like urbanization or tree canopy, but it also includes socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, gender, age, so social factors in addition to physical factors. So a couple examples from this team. There was a paper that they released last year that categorized, looked at different definitions of heat waves that are relevant for policy purposes, like extreme heat warning systems, and identified which different heat wave definitions are associated with the most hospitalizations in each zip code across the state of California. So this could hopefully be used in planning contexts. And then a paper that's being worked on right now by a PhD student, it's part of her thesis defense that she's giving tomorrow, is looking at community characteristics that explain the differences through space in heat-related hospitalizations. So which of these community characteristics contribute the most to susceptibility to extreme heat? And so these are things that are related usually to historical discrimination, things like redlining. So essentially those practices still have impacts today on who is hospitalized during a heat wave event. Okay, so the next research theme area is ecohydrology and sustainable greening, which is led by Morgan Levy. If you're not familiar with the term ecohydrology, it's studying the interaction between water and ecological systems. So her team is looking at the relationship between temperature and vegetation, because that is different depending on where in the world you are. And that's important it's important to know that if you want to, say, implement urban greening strategies. And paper, I'm going to highlight a tool that her team created recently called the Ecohydrology and Heat Explorer tool. So this is an interactive web platform where you can compare and hopefully this can be useful for policy purposes, and it's also already being used in some educational contexts by our education team. So just as an example of what you could use this tool for, here's a comparison of the same site. So this is Kearney High School during a drought year and then after several years after. So you can see the normalized difference vegetation index, which is a measure of plant greenness, has changed significantly across these 2 points in time in the same area. Yes, okay. So then the first of our two broader, like all-encompassing themes is community engagement, which is being led by Darby Berry and our partners at San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative. So we've been using their framework and best practices for engagement over the past few years. And they're helping us to enable equitable engagement with partners from regional and local government to NGOs and community-based organizations. So I believe somebody today will be talking about this in a little more detail. Is that right? This program? Okay. So then I won't get into it. Okay. I won't get into it too much, but we're excited to be working on a specific project funded by the Extreme Heat Community Resilience Program with SDRCC, as well as several local city governments in the county. And we'll be providing some data and observations to help for planning purposes. I'm really excited to start that work very soon. Okay, finally, theme 5, education to broaden participation, which is being led by Nan Renner and Alec Barron. They are helping us expand our impact through educational activities that also broaden participation of underrepresented students. And they're developing curricula resources using our local phenomenon of extreme heat to teach about the broader phenomenon of climate change. So just 2 examples of some of the work that our education team is working on. We have a project where we're installing weather stations at schools and a couple like community centers. So we have only a few so far, but right now we're working on getting more at Earth Lab Community Station and that's useful for the research purposes, but it's a really awesome hands-on opportunity for students and teachers to engage with the real weather data. The kids are usually really excited being able to actually see like how the data is collected. And we have a PhD student who's been really instrumental, that's Alexander on the left, in installing these. And kids, I think, really connect to having an actual scientist come to their classroom or come to their school and tell them about how we work with data as scientists. So that's a really cool project. But I think one of our biggest impacts from our education team is the curricula resources that they've developed, including the Cooler Communities curriculum, which is a 5th grade unit looking at how humans impact the land around them. So they compare land surface temperature with vegetation, and they learn about climate change and how hopefully they can sort of be activists and help make changes to their own communities to cool the earth and to cool their neighborhoods in the future. And I believe that's it. Yeah, so those are just some of the projects and activities we've been up to in the past couple of years. But if you're interested in more, we have our website, there's a blog and a newsletter, and I'm happy to answer questions, or you can contact me at m1hale@ucsd.edu. Awesome. I think I did go over time, but thank you.
Not much.
All right, board member questions?
I just have one question. Still, I am. And that just has to do with, I noticed that you had a term on there until 2027 for the length of the project. What is your expectation for either that funding to continue or anything beyond that?
Yeah, good question. I was actually going to talk about it and then I zoomed through, but so that's the date that NSF has funded us for, 2022 through 2027. But we want to continue the work beyond that through other funding sources. And knock on wood, we won't have to, but it's possible that we may have to start getting other funding sources sooner than that because of the regards to NSF. So we want to continue the work, whether or not NSF is funding us, whether or not that's post 2027 or sooner. But yeah, we hope to keep doing it through other funding sources.
Just following that line of thinking, what's your involvement with the state of California or in its agencies? Are they part of some of your teams, or how do you relate to the state level?
So our research is like focused mainly on Southern California and mostly on San Diego region. But I mean, some of the, like, especially for theme 1, the atmosphere, land, ocean, climate research is usually in broader scales. So California or West Coast or beyond. So individual people have partners or resources that they work with, whether that be like NOAA or NWS. I guess that's part of NOAA. But we are not working with like state government agencies. We're, in terms of government agency partnerships, it's county or smaller. But like the research itself sometimes is at a broader scale than just local. Yeah.
Sorry. Today, the Resiliency Advisory Board is talking about their Climate Action Plan Strategy 5, which includes some open space, tidal wetland habitat, but also street trees. So following up on that, and maybe in advance of the next piece, have you worked at all specifically with street trees and their impact on heat island effects? Or are you working directly with the city of San Diego on its planning for this kind of thing, for extreme heat?
I don't believe anyone in the project is like working specifically on that plan. Not that I'm aware of, but I could be wrong. Street trees, I'm not sure. I know that there's been projects looking at, including some research I've done, looking at like tree canopy cover in general, but not specifically street trees. Yeah, I don't think that there's any projects we've done looking at that.
Just a note, so the city does participate when they're doing stakeholder engagement to sort of how heat up the city is research coming out of it. And then we completed urban heat vulnerability index, which is kind of the model for the grant that Mary was talking about, that is being coordinated through the San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative. as part of our urban heat vulnerability index, one of the tools that we used was called the invest model, where you could look at increase of vegetation and green space and how that provided.
I'll also expand on the community engagement side. We've had a pretty long-standing relationship with Tree San Diego.
Yeah.
And talking with them about their research and data regarding like street canopy, but I don't, or urban tree canopy, but I don't know how specific they've gotten to like the actual like tree planting and stuff like that, but yeah.
The first map that you showed of or the third page of the land surface temperature is, it's so many questions there about the role of street trees or, or the lack of a signal from street trees.
Yeah,
So just
absolutely,
following
yeah.
on that, yeah.
Yeah, no, because I mean, like, it's, if you wanna implement greening, like. It's probably hard in an area that's already developed, like, say, I don't know, along El Cajon Boulevard or something, to just. What are you gonna do, like destroy a whole block and put a park, like every few, like, street trees, I think are a really critical way of introducing greening throughout.
Yeah.
More urbanized areas like that, so yeah. Good point.
Yeah, just on that point, it'd be interesting, since there's such a long period of time you're looking at, are there any areas where it's like improved? I know each summer's been different, but I mean, there have been projects, I can't think of anything specific, but projects in redevelopment in some of those areas that probably have had to incorporate some more greening with new standards. Has anything improved over time? Would be kind of interesting.
Yeah. So for this grant that was briefly mentioned, we're gonna be producing heat maps. I'm not sure. I think like at a city scale, but I'm not sure of the specific details, but hopefully that can be used for compare. I know like City of San Diego already has a heat map from a few years ago, but yeah, absolutely.
So this is something the hub is going to be doing, heat map?
Yes, as part of this partnership with the SDRCC and with several cities, San Diego, Chula Vista, and Lisa, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that you guys are looking at kind of reconciling the value of urban tree canopy with a water constrained environment like San Diego. You're looking at other kind of policy challenges or opportunities, like challenges being the city's sidewalk policy, the maintenance policy, which it's kind of third rail, but
I'm not familiar with this.
it's basically like who maintains, so is in a, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong here, but in a parkway where trees would go, there's shared maintenance and repair costs between the neighbor and the city, and that's been like a topic of discussion for a number of years. So one of the policy recommendations that comes out of the heat hub is to do more trees. I'm just finding that might also want to be looked at too, because that's something that policy has been in existence for some time and it's been looked at a number of different ways. Dating myself here, but I remember some member David Alvarez took a stab at it before he left to go represent us in the assembly. But on the council side, he was looking at this, but anyway, just flagging it.
Yeah.
Because it can be a significant cost burden either to the city if they want to take on 100% of maintaining those sidewalks and any damage that comes from trees, or if it's put back on the neighbors, that also could be a big cost burden for them too. So it can kind of cut both ways depending on how one looks at it. So just
Yeah.
FYI, and I know that you guys cover multiple jurisdictions, not just City of San Diego. So I'm only speaking for the City of San Diego, so I don't know how it works in La Mesa or other East County cities.
No, that's a good point. I mean,
Just
also,
FYI.
yeah, and the maintenance of the trees themselves, I think, like, I remember talking to someone at Tree San Diego like a couple of years ago after we had those really big winter storms. And just like the number of trees that were damaged and had to be cut back or removed. Yeah, I think that's another like, I don't know, complication, I guess, too, because like all this effort of planting trees that then they just get
That's another,
Sorry.
that's another great point. Once again, dating myself, when I first started working at the city years ago, the city arborist was always like kind of the service that got cut in tough times. And I think there was one who, back then, and then we did contracts too, but there was like, I think there was like one arborist. This is back in like 2011. But it was, to your point, maintenance and things like that of street trees, it's tough. You have to staff up or increase your contracts for service, or however you want to approach it. So yeah, it's another fair point in addition to the sidewalk thing as well.
Just gonna check. Comment, it doesn't look like that.
So there was a chat.
Oh, they just showed you. Oh, cool. You heard about that. Awesome.
Did you have a question?
Not a question, but just, I guess one of the things that I think we said we were gonna do is just let you know that if, just to, keep updating us with anything so that we can help to be a source of your engagement with the community as the Resiliency Advisory Board.
Awesome, yeah. I'd love to.
If there's anything else we can offer as the board, but yeah, we want to keep educated on it.
For sure, yeah, we'll have our, just had in February. February? Yeah. We have like an annual, like all partners summit, so we will keep that in mind for the next one, or if there's smaller events between that. Usually we have like our all partners meeting once a year, and then we'll like have smaller meetings that are relevant to like certain research theme areas or their specific stakeholders may meet separately. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Great job. Thanks, Mary.
All right, moving on to agenda item 8. This is an action item. This is kind of the continued action item on selection of focus area for the wildfire resilience policy goal number 2. Select topics for additional fact finding presentations. If I recall correctly, we also are going to have some additional presentations in June.
Well, and this may be a good place to bring us up. So the June presentation was to be on the energy topic.
Mhm.
And when I went back and looked at, okay, what did people express interest in? The 2 points were energy storage and grid resilience.
Mhm.
So along the way in my own exploration, I also uncovered a friend of mine who was on the climate advisory board, who was an expert in green building and building codes, and now specifically how those are coming into play in the wildfire rebuilding effort. So it occurred to me that I particularly have 3 topics, and that maybe this first one is an answer to the topic A under 8.
Mhm.
Because there is an overlap. There is an overlap between what's going on in energy efficiency, green building world, and there's actually a lot of activity on there. And Al is available to come June 12th, if that is of interest. Otherwise, I have 2 other possibilities that I'm going to bring up under future meetings.
Yeah,
Erica, did you say that there is not communication between those 2 worlds, or
Oh, there is a lot.
There is a
yes.
lot, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot, and I think Josh is a good possible speaker, former executive director of the San Diego Green Building Council, and then California Energy Association, and now it's in a consulting capacity, so, and on the Climate Advisory Board.
So I know my
One
thoughts.
topic idea.
My thoughts are, because that was one of the topics that we thought could warrant additional work, is that we should hear those presentations, hear that, and decide after that whether it's something we want to dig into more, or if it's something else we want to focus on as part of that wildfire resiliency topic. Did you have a question?
You mean hear the presentation before we decide to have the presentation? I'm confused.
Have the presentation next month before deciding
wanna go any
basically
further
taking
with
any
it.
action on item A.
So select topic for presentation, and so I should go ahead and, I think. All right, and then what I would also do, oh, sorry. Should shut up and let us make that as a decision.
I think so. Stan, do you have a question?
I have some comments, I guess. Over that part. So, at the last meeting, we had some good discussion and there were some motions made and adopted. What I got out of that was to prioritize the completion and communication of those things the city is working relative to state requirements. So the various state activities that we reported on to us. I thought that was a good motion and a good way to say what our interest is. So I tried to do a little research then on what's the status of both the completion and the communication of that activity to somebody that had a concern, any citizen, anybody, besides us checking it, right? So summarize the finding is that it'd be very difficult for anybody to find the status of work being done on evacuation routes and areas that only have one entrance. They're in there somewhere if you go on the city's website, but usually they are really very deep into some document relative to a city council presentation or our meetings to cross somebody. But it is not something that's easy to determine that either the status or that there would affect somebody. So one of the thoughts that I had in terms of following up on where we were last time is to pursue that line of thinking a little bit about how can we work with the appropriate city agencies and departments to help get an easier website developed or an easier way to find it in the city's records. So for example, if you wanted to find out if you were in one of those areas that were being studied for lack of access, you could not, I don't think. So would it be possible though, with the appropriate department involved, to make that something that can be accomplished over the year? Where it's easy for people to find out how they're being affected by the mapping of high fire zones, but also the other requirements relative to SB 99, 87. So again, to me, there's the other topics that are coming up. But I don't feel like we've quite nailed what we can accomplish as a board on the ones we've been working with. And that would be how I think we could make a difference then, is to encourage the appropriate departments to create that access and the communication that we wanted to promote.
So I think that's a good point. I think our motions at the meeting last time were really things to go into the final report that we ultimately send to the city council. I guess I'd be interested in either hearing from you or from Julia. Is that really something that should be a role of this committee, sort of making websites, or should that be something that we recommend specifics to the appropriate city departments? And we can put it on a report, but maybe it's something that we take an action on, agendize and take an action and make a recommendation to the city that be a focus and potentially show it to us.
Yeah, so the kind of role of the Resiliency Advisory Board there would be a recommendation or a request for action versus actually creating a website. That would have to happen on the cities, and then the departments would have to be, staff would have to be directed to do that. But certainly that could be in your annual report and what's presented to the Environment Committee if there's identified lack of resources that you wanted to see, or that you thought would be helpful based off of the presentations and the work and research that you've done. That would certainly be suitable. I will note I think so for the very high fire hazard severity, so map changes. It's always a mouthful. Fire does have a web page that goes through all of the work that's being done for that. So that is a kind of best for the work that's currently underway with regards to evacuation routes and some of the other legislative requirements. Typically, when we're in the process of still doing the analysis, we're not going to publish partially completed analysis just because we want to make sure that we, you know, finish doing the work, trashing anything. There is on Fire's page, find it. A map that shows their previous work, the at-risk subdivision was a legislative requirement that you asked us to look into that was showing constrained parcels. Those are mapped and that's available on Fire's webpage. But I think, and you know, certainly there's maybe more room for discussion as this topic goes on of, you know, a recommendation could be having one map with all of these layers once the analysis is done, completed in one place. That is maybe a little bit more intuitive for the public to find. And I can share these links out later if that's helpful, so everyone sees it.
So I guess just getting back to Stan's point, I think if we were gonna do that with the confines of the agenda item, the action agenda item, we would need to set that as a topic to discuss the website and the outreach at a future meeting, and maybe we could work with Julia to see if someone could come and attend and present on it. That isn't similar to what I was thinking. We had a presentation a few meetings ago from representatives of San Diego Fire, and they talked about their brush management program and the budget requests. A few weeks ago, I saw an article sort of talking about the status of that. And I don't want to speak for them, and I don't know the tilt of the article, but it was basically sort of saying they didn't have enough resources to implement the full brush management program. And so I thought it might be interesting to ask them to come report back, and maybe they could report now that they've had a little more time with the maps on what the next steps are, if they're making any local changes, anything like that, because I think they have 120 days from they were released in March to take public comments and adopt. And I don't know what's happening from there.
That would be great. The brush management policy and funding has a lot of other resiliency connections than just wildfire, I would say, in terms of habitat resiliency and ecosystem health and that kind of thing. So if they are invited, it would be great to hear. We could focus on wildfire specifically if we wanted to, but they also, I would love to hear from them about habitat connections and also what they're doing to promote habitat resilience in the city as well. But what Stan introduced just now, that was my feeling of the meetings that we've had, is that there's a lot of information out there, but it's not very well, or that we could do a better job, city could do a better job of putting it all together. So I think that would be a great recommendation, but I also didn't know that this website existed that Julia just shared. So I don't feel like I'm that I know too much about this. It doesn't affect my neighborhood very much. So I think that what Stan got from the previous meetings is what I got as well, and I think it would be great to recommend to the city that this information be put together, put into one web map, mailed out to people in those communities or something like that. But I don't feel like I know specifically what to direct the city, you know, what to recommend. But a general recommendation of please share these information sets that are out there better with the people who are affected by them. I would think would be great to come from us.
I think that's a great comment. Did you have something before I add on?
Well, I was just gonna kind of add on to this general discussion. I want to thank Stan for bringing us back to that, because that was certainly my feeling after that last presentation, was that the people that are, you know, we talk about at-risk subdivisions. When it was defined as subdivisions that don't have two egress or exit paths.
Hmm.
And to me, those are the ones that need to be highlighted, and I feel like what we are starting to hear around the table here is a little bit of consensus about what a recommendation would be. And I don't know if we have a means of capturing that, maybe that's in our minutes, is like, that this is an area for additional consideration and potential recommendation in our report at the end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, I think if that's really the recommendation, we have enough flexibility in this motion to put something towards our final report and recommendation to the city. I think if we wanted to have a more detailed conversation, we probably have to agendize it at a future meeting and then have a motion for that. One question to Julia, don't we also have somebody coming from the city to talk about kind of the biology plan as it relates to our other strategy for the coming meeting?
Yes, so for July, we're going to have our biodiverse SB team come and present. So that includes both our vernal pool habitat conservation program as well as our multiple species conservation program. Within that plan, there was consideration for brush management impacts on habitat, so I can have that highlight of something for them to speak to.
Yeah, I think that going back to Andrew's point, I think that'd be good to have it and maybe speak to that at that time. So I think the potential motions that we could consider are one, if we want a motion to ask Erica to invite a presentation, sort of an add-on presentation to one she was already working on related to fire. I think we could have a potential motion related to outreach and website if we want to make that either as a future agenda topic or as just a recommendation if we feel comfortable to the city this time. And then I don't know if we need a motion for what you just said, Julia, is to talk about to add on sort of the brush management aspect to the presentation we're already receiving.
You know, I just kind of.
Okay.
And basically, just to be clear, what I was thinking of was using the topic that I had already volunteered to cover in June for this purpose.
Mhm.
Intro, my speaker with a little bit of words about the two additional topics that they come up under agenda items.
As far as providing a recommendation goes, I would recommend that we wait until the annual report, because I feel like that would be something that we'd want to reflect. If there is an official recommendation, there'd be a host of other things too. I just don't want us to get lost in the weeds with recommending things here and there on different topics. It would probably be better if we're just consolidated into one report. We can put all of them for it.
If you want to document it, you could document it as a draft recommendation, that's later, that way it's in the minutes and pull from it.
Yeah, whether we
That's
set.
helpful, because I think I might forget it.
I mean, that was really my intent with the motion last meeting is when we read the annual report, we pull that and just drop it in.
So reading the minutes is, I think, are always well done. The motion was continue to prioritize, but it also was board request city return to the board with updates. So we already have that in the motion. I guess my comment was we ought to make sure when we have those updates, that one of the topics to be explored is how the information is communicated, not only on the status of the work, but how easy it is for people to find out. That's just kind of a further thought on when we're inviting people, what do we want to hear? That's one topic, update on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think my thoughts are, I don't think planning necessarily committed to that they would update us before our next report is due. So I think it's an important topic and to make a motion so that we can refer that as well to the annual report. Because I don't know if they're gonna have any updates between now and our annual report this year.
Get that scheduled. Never mind, I do.
Well, I motion that Erica invite a speaker about green building codes and its interaction with wildfire resiliency at our June meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Motion by Andrew and second by Stan. All in favor?
Use myself. Okay, great.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously with all members present.
And then on this other one, I definitely think I was about to say the opposite of what Ian said, but now he's convinced me. I think we should just officially note it somewhere so that we don't lose it and that it should go into our. Be brought back up when we're writing our annual report that the job of the resiliency board is to make sure we are organizing and sharing information with the public about these issues. And that this particular issue is one that we know there's a lot of resources out there, but that might not be very well organized and shared with the people specifically it's affected with and everybody in the city, so.
That
So
sounds
do you
like a
want-
motion.
Flag that.
Yeah, is that a
Do
motion?
do we need a motion to make a draft recommendation though? Or just to put it in the minutize it?
It'll be captured in the minutes, so you don't necessarily need a
Right.
motion for a draft.
And I'm, as a system, I highlighted two things here about getting an update from the city and then. Yeah, making resources more easily accessible by the public. And I think it goes beyond the mapping zones and resources. And kind of aligning the resources with any state requirements, and maybe it's something moving forward. Now that we know that that's gonna be a part of our annual report, you guys can make sure you note that and I'll keep those things highlighted. It'll be easy to find when it's time to put that together. I don't think that needs a minute, but just, you know, I can make that a system for moving forward.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I think that will help us a lot.
And we could even ask speakers like, do you have resources that would be important for the public to access? And so that we can like have them help us to help the staff, yeah.
I really like the idea of having a system to flag these things, so at the end of the year, we just come back and we're starting to draft it, unless it's gonna be a subcommittee to draft it, we can pull those things right out. But I think the only thing I would flag is concern that I don't consider it part of the role of this board to do these things. So much as to say, you know, there are little cul-de-sac neighborhoods out there who may not know that they are now in a high fire threat. And that information needs to be pulled out and presented more actively. Or something very, very pointed about a specific need in the form of the recommendation, telling somebody, telling staff to do it, flagging the importance of it to this board, rather than saying, we're taking it on, we have the resources to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I think we have one motion that we needed. We are coming up with a system, but not a motion on the next item. Does anyone else have any comments or other motions related to agenda item 8A?
Well, do we need a motion on just agreeing to wait until after the June meeting to decide on the focus on priority goal 2? Or is that kind of minutized? To use Andrew from last.
I don't think we need a motion, do you?
Wait,
I think it is from last minute's meeting, so you're.
Yeah.
I feel like we've carried it out. We've selected a topic for a presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. 8A, is that asking for a focus area, like a geographic focus area? Is just
No.
a topical focus area? Okay, all right, sorry.
Okay,
Hi.
then I think we will move on to 9A, presentation on climate action plan by Andrew Martin.
Andrew, come on up. So I have the dashboard in your web page up here, if you want to drag them over, and then I'll just get you a screen share.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So my name's Andrew Martin, I'm Climate Action Program Manager with the city, so part of the climate planning team, which is now part of the city planning department. And yeah, Julia invited me here today to talk to you all about strategy 5 of the climate action plan, which is resilient infrastructure and healthy ecosystems. Can I pull this up so I
You're
can,
sharing the big screen.
I have to go like this?
So you'll want.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, sorry. Screen. And then that arrows on our side.
so I can just, oh, you
Yeah.
PDF'd it, okay.
I did. Is that okay if you on your side?
I don't need them. Just need to know how to navigate them. All right, so let's get to it. So, yeah, rather than just jumping right into strategy 5 and getting into the details. We have a climate action implementation plan that really gets into the details to make these planned actions implementable, how we monitor them, how we report on them. And then I can show you our CAP dashboard as well, which is where we kind of in a more flexible, real time is a strong word, but on a regular basis, post information on the status of the actions. We have indicator data on the actions on there. But I thought it might be nice to go through all that with you, maybe give you all a sense of really this wealth of information that we have about the CAP actions. Then hopefully that kind of empowers you to investigate further and look at the things that you want to look at, you know, as individuals and as a board. So that's kind of what I thought we'd do. Forgive me, this will take me a bit to get used to. So yeah, so just at a high level, just to set a baseline for our conversation. Simplest level, climate action plan is over here. What are the strategies the city can take to reduce emissions, reduce climate pollution, contributing to the climate crisis? And climate resilient SD, there are climate hazards happening that are anticipated to be exacerbated and worsen over time. What are our strategies as a city, as a community to deal with that? So that's sort of where those are. That's not to say that they are totally mutually exclusive. And then here, this just gives you a little bit more detail kind of on the differences, but with these plans and with some of our implementation tools as a city, we do recognize there are a lot of areas of intersection between these plans to the point that maybe you were making, Erica, about like on the building space that you were talking about in the previous item. Just some examples of that within the climate action plan. It does identify different core benefits of climate actions in addition to the primary thing we're looking at of reducing emissions. One of those is climate resiliency. So if you kind of scan the climate action plan, you can understand the ones we've tagged for their resiliency benefits. Some other examples, we have two different council policies to mention. One is sort of setting a methodology for the council to prioritize climate or CAP actions for implementation. Resiliency is expressly embedded in there. And if you look at the council's infrastructure policy for capital improvement project prioritization, again, you see criteria for both emissions reduction and increasing resiliency projects with resiliency benefits. So all things else being equal, you have projects that have those things, they're going to do well in these methodologies. So we're trying to sort of build that in our implementation tools and not take a single issue approach to these questions. So kind of moving on, again, we're starting at the high level and kind of like getting deeper as we go. So just climate action plan focused on how can we advance ourselves towards net zero emissions by 2035. And again, not just as if that weren't a tall enough order, which it is, how can we also do that in ways that prioritize investments in our communities of concern They help with clean air, they help with good jobs. And again, other co-benefits such as resiliency, how can we have a multi-benefit approach? How can we do all that at the same time? That's sort of like the core of the approach of the climate action plan and its implementation. I wanted to though show this slide for two reasons. One was to give you an overview of the 6 strategies the climate action plan is organized around for reducing emissions. I have slides on each of these if this is kind of difficult to read, and we can talk about kind of what each one is. But also to see the relative role each one has in reducing emissions within the CAP. They're not all created equal. So the bigger the size of the wedge, the bigger the role in reducing emissions. So the yellow is decarbonization of the built environment. That's focused on buildings, and we'll talk more about that. Green is essentially moving towards renewable electricity. I think I said that wrong. That was, I'm getting myself confused. Yes, no, that's correct. And then orange, strategy 3, that's getting to mobility planning, transportation planning, community planning. How can we encourage other modes of travel, reduce vehicle miles traveled, that sort of thing. And then moving on down the list, kind of the dark blue, that's strategy 4, that's centered around waste management, methane capture, landfill methane capture. And then strategy 5, the resilient infrastructure, healthy ecosystems. That's sort of the turquoise, maybe a little bit difficult to see. So it's within the plan. You can see its emission reduction role. And the current plan is relatively smaller than other sectors, but still an important. And then last on there, strategy 6, kind of the lighter green at the bottom. That's where we've identified the need for additional emerging actions to make additional progress reducing emissions. So be technological innovations, partnerships, that sort of thing. So now we can kind of go through these one by one. If you like, we can kind of breeze through the ones that aren't strategy 5 and get more into strategy 5, but wanted to at least set a minimal awareness of kind of what's going on, because if you really dig into each of these, maybe not every single other strategy area of the CAP, but for many of them, I think you can probably find areas of like potential intersection with resilience actions. Not for sure you can in strategy 5 with the infrastructure and ecosystems, but you can in other places as well. So again, for strategy 1, and what I'm showing you here, each of the CAP strategies, they have performance targets assigned. So you'll also find emissions reductions in there, sort of behind, how we're estimating the emission reduction potential for these kind of performance targets. So again, here you can see, pretty ambitious targets around moving away from natural gas use in existing and new buildings. For strategy 2, couple components. So number 1, the electricity serving our communities, moving towards renewable electricity. There's a big emphasis there on our role within in partnership with San Diego Community Power, and then also vehicle electrification, zero emission vehicle technologies is a major part of the CAP. On strategy 3, I kind of alluded to this, but just really moving towards transit, active transportation as viable, convenient modes of travel within the city. That reduces the amount of vehicle miles traveled. And then, yeah, I think that essentially. Strategy 4, as I mentioned, really the primary thing driving emissions in this strategy is sending organic waste to landfills. The decomposition of that waste generates methane emissions, a powerful greenhouse gas. So the strategies here, or the actions within this strategy, are centered around avoiding, diverting that waste away from the landfill, and then capturing methane emissions from landfills. Also, wastewater methane capture is another place to address that emission source. And then this will bring us to strategy 5, which has 3 main elements, and you can see the specific targets here. So the first one is around sort of habitat management or that sort of thing, so specifically centered on tidal wetlands and riparian habitats. That's storing carbon emissions. If you may improve the management of those lands, you increase the rate of emissions sequestered from the atmosphere and stored in soil and vegetation. Tree canopy cover, so tree planting, tree maintenance. Those actions are housed here. And then the last one, water supply, and it's specific to San Diego's pure water SD program. So increasing the amount of water here that's supplied locally as opposed to imported across longer distances. It's a very energy and emission intensive process to source, convey, treat water through its life cycle. So doing that locally as opposed to from farther away. There's many benefits, but one of which is lower greenhouse gas emissions. And then, as I mentioned, we have a strategy 6 within our climate action plan, which presents different potential emerging actions that can't really quantify their emission reduction right now, but the CAP identifies as items to work on going forward, recognizing that to get to net zero by 2035, which is the overarching goal of the CAP, additional actions are needed to do that. All right, so at this point, I thought we could get more into the details of strategy 5. As I mentioned at the top, I thought we could do that kind of by walking through our climate action implementation plan. So you can see sort of the detailed information and planning that's done to sort of go from really policy level in the climate action plan to implementation. This slide has annual department work plans on. That's one purpose of this implementation plan, is really trying to equip the city departments charged with CAP implementation actions with the details they need to do their own resource planning, to do their own budget planning as part of the annual budget process, which they are required to do. They're required to prepare these annual work plans to feed into the budget process. But for our purposes, it'll be helpful, I think, to walk through this just to give an understanding of these strategy 5 actions. So what I have about 4 or 5 slides on, I know it's a great slide. So this is a single page from the implementation plan. One could say it's a lot of information for a single page, but I can walk through what's on here with you. But yeah, this is really trying to go from high level details in the plan to the information to help decision makers, department employees operationalize and implement, and then also monitor and report on these actions over time. So you'll find this for each strategy. I screenshotted strategy 5 for you all. So just kind of starting at the top, we saw these on the previous slide, but sort of what are the performance targets? What are these actions? What is their end game? What are they aiming for? So here we have the restoration of natural lands. We have the tree canopy. So you can see here there's acreages of habitat restoration. There's urban tree canopy cover percentages. Beneath that kind of donut pie chart with the percentage, that's the percentage of all the reductions in the CAP. That's the percentage that come from that collection of actions. So it's less than 1% right now for restoring natural lands. That's what that means. And then as you go lower, if you can see the measures heading in the middle. So this is kind of like the organizational hierarchy of the CAP. It breaks these into measures. So sequestration and tree canopy. And then under there, those are all the actions that kind of feed up into that. And actions are implementation actions. So they're more sort of action oriented and action verbs. And they're more directives that a staff member can take and sort of do work to move towards these overarching targets and overarching goals you see at the top. Maybe the other thing to say here, maybe 2 other things. These labels of foundational, next, other. This is an attempt to organize, long lists of actions within the climate action plan. Within the whole climate action plan, there's 190 actions. This is to help understand the sequence and relationship of individual actions, so foundational ones. Is that maybe adopting like a specific type of plan that you should do first to sort of understand existing conditions and challenges before you go implementing specific things that might be foundational, and you might move on to other things. There's preliminary ones, maybe there's some basic work you should do before you get too far into taking action or making investments. So that's kind of what's going on down there. And at the very bottom, those are measures of success. So we want to see how we're doing over time. At the time the CAP was put together and the implementation plan was prepared, the performance targets at the top are not necessarily the like granularity of data we have access to for reporting. So that's the attempt with the measures of success, is what sort of objective information do we have as a city or is sort of out there in the world that we can collect to transparently report on progress and keep track of how we're doing over time. You keep going, and then this is kind of one main element of the implementation plan, and then the other are these detailed pages. So these are going line, action by action, one line at a time, trying to give you, again, understanding the information needed to implement something. So you've got the going left to right. What is the action? Is it a foundational one? Does it come next, etc.? What type of it is, very critically. The next one, which city department is in the lead role, parenthetically, or any city departments in the supporting role. These icons, when you look at the web-based version, so like the sort of the handshake there showing a partnership with another agency or entity, you can hover over those and get more details. Implementation costs, those are specific costs to the city, not necessarily costs to other parties who might be involved in, say, a code update or a program. And then the status, and then the draft version I screenshotted, the slides here, they don't have the council prioritization score, but that's in the final version too. So that's a number 1 to 100. I referred to that briefly earlier, but it's weighting all these factors about emission reduction potential. I mentioned resiliency is another one of them, feasibility, and it gets a score 0 to 100 to understand its prioritization in the scheme. Again, there's 190, can't do them all at the same time. How can we prioritize? And I'll go kind of quickly from here. So this is the same information I just walked through, but this time for the tree canopy actions. Trees have a lot of actions, so there's 2 full pages worth, so a lot there in the tree canopy measure. And then here's the third element of strategy 5, which is local water supply. But same information, these are the water supply actions. And then if we're okay on time, I thought we could actually just go to the dashboard, the public facing site. I can just kind of walk you through how you can navigate through that if you're interested and want to understand kind of more in an interactive way on your own some of the information I just went through in the implementation plan and more. And also it's kept up to date, it's much more nimble to update than a plan, right? So that's a great place to go to see the recent information on any CAP action you might be interested in. You do that. Julia kindly already pulled it up for me. All right, can you help me get this on the screen? Share? Do I need to drag it over?
Yeah,
Okay.
since we're sharing that one, so for that people.
Thank you. Okay. I want to show you like maybe 3 different. You can sort of interface this in several different ways. I'll show you. So one, if you go here to strategies at the top, you can, again, we went through the 6 of them, the 6 being emerging actions. The dashboard has 5 that have like the measurable specific actions within them. So we can go here. This is one way to get started. You get interested in strategy 5, we want to check it out, you go here. So it gives you a kind of a little narrative about what this strategy is all about. And then we looked at how it's organized into measures. So this is kind of, if you're not familiar, like what's in strategy 5, you can, this is a great way to sort of start to get into the dashboard. Go to sequestration. You might recognize this from the other. You can see what the target is, the emissions reduction potential. We got a lot of information about its sort of capability for these types of criteria. The core benefits, this is displaying, I think weirdly on this large screen, but resiliency, co-benefits, et cetera. Then you can hear all the actions that are housed under there. Then let's say we want to talk about this one here related to urban canyons. Okay, what's the status and the progress of this one? Has it been started yet? Is it in progress? That sort of thing. Who's responsible for this one? You can find out that information.
See, this one also has the council prioritization score in it.
Yes, so all those scores are in here as well. Again, these are 0 to 100. There's a lot of information. I know we need to go through every single thing. I don't want to throw too much at you. So that's a great way to just sort of see what's in here. I want to understand sort of what these categories mean and what's housed where. It could also be the case, you know what you want. You can just go to actions. Takes a moment often.
So many actions.
That may be what's going on. So here, you know what you want, you can go like this. You can go straight to, I already know I'm interested in trees, you can get at it this way. Actually before, and then that will, what I think an interesting feature is that it gives you a summary of all the actions. And then you can go look at them all together like this, as opposed to the other kind of way of going in, you look at them one at a time. And I wanted to show you this too. So again, there's 190. If you want to see at a glance kind of how we're doing, you can hover over here. You can see that 57% or 108 are in progress, and do similar. These are all the different, status categories. How many have been updated in the recent past? It's like, okay, there's been some activity. I've been on here for a while, et cetera, et cetera. And then maybe last one, you can also just go straight to indicator data. That's kind of what your interest is. You don't do anything, you can just look at all of the indicators currently being tracked. And then again, you've got a drop down here if you want to go into a specific strategy. And then some, like for trees, you can go right to trees. We have a couple tree canopy indicators. So that's kind of what I wanted to go through. So at that point, happy to take questions or turn it back over. Thank you. Yes, good questions first.
I have a couple thoughts, and I like how, I understand that there's a whole strategy called resiliency, but as you said at the beginning, a lot of the other strategies have resiliency implications. And I don't know if it would make sense that it would be called an indicator, but anyway, it would be really interesting if you could either have a note or somewhere that talks about that overlap and how doing those strategies for mitigation also helps with adaptation and resiliency. like
Yeah.
renewable energy and stuff like that, just make it like clear that that's also achieving a goal. So that's like, you know, doing two things at once. And then on the flip side of that, I always think about trade-offs and like, obviously, if you're gonna do tree canopy, the trade-off is more water and you're trying to conserve water. And that would be a huge effort, but I always think that it would be really great to be able to point out that there's a recognition of the trade-offs for accomplishing each of these as it relates to other strategies.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a lot, but I always just think about things like that, like, yeah.
yeah, no, I think that's a
recognizing
good,
it.
that's kind of a good point of feedback on the side where we do, I think, do a good job of tracking the core benefits, but not necessarily the opposite of that, like you're mentioning. And then I know I went through a lot and kind of quickly, but within the dashboard, there is it's done in a qualitative way, but there is a space where you can see that, okay, this action has resilience benefits, it has clean air benefits. That is, we do have that information. It is at a bit of a high level, but it's within.
I'll just add a note there, the core benefits within the climate action plan and climate resilient SD plan are largely the same, so you can see air quality benefits, water quality benefits across both of them, and then while the climate action plan says if it has a resiliency benefit, the climate resilient SD plan says whether or not it has a greenhouse gas mitigation benefit.
I don't know if you have the answer to this, but just out of curiosity, do you know how far we are in our progress for the like 2030 to like the 2030 target for strategy 5?
Which one?
Strategy 5.
For emissions or?
Just like these benchmarks here, I'm wondering if like you have the like how far we have progressed to making those benchmark numbers.
We have some of them in the dashboard.
I'm gonna Google Chrome.
Thank you. I didn't know which browser it was in. Let's see. We can see this graph. So you have to do a little bit of work to interpret. But you can do reports too, but this is not doing it cumulatively, which is the goal is cumulative, right? But it's showing you the amount each year, so you can sort of do a little quick math and tabulate it up, and it's not expressly presented for you that way in this format, but that information is there.
It'd be
You
cool
can
to
do-
have it cumulatively so that we can
Agreed, yeah.
see the, because right now it just kind of looks like we're flatlining, which
Yeah.
is not the case at all, I guess.
Right.
Thank you.
I had a question, the ranking, the prioritization by council, was that just a one and done review, or is that updated? Somewhat regularly?
Yeah, so that was created about the same time as the implementation plan. It was a council policy. I did not work for the city at that time, so I have some sort of awareness of it. But it was done in coordination with, and I think led by the independent budget analyst office. You can read the council policy. Yeah, I don't know. I would have to follow up and see if there's any kind of requirement to update it or need to update it.
Or I'm curious if there's metrics for updating it based off of new council members or changing budget situations. I don't know, I was just more inquisitive than an
Yeah.
actual recommendation for
I think it's-
benchmarks, but just curious if there are any.
I think it's more that it was prepared, it was presented to them, the council approved it, or adopted it.
Right,
It would be their prerogative to change it, I think.
yeah, also maybe like changing or new revelations in research.
Yeah.
Scientific information that's available. Things like that, but understanding that it does look like a lot to go through and update all of them, so
Yeah,
it seems like, yeah, it wouldn't. I wouldn't, I wouldn't recommend this, I wouldn't be done too frequently, then they just become overburdened with it, but if there are certain triggers or benchmarks. not
Yeah,
worth
I've seen
looking at.
that before, but I.
I would anticipate when we do any plan updates,
What's that?
when we do any plan updates, actions will be updated and then probably, council prioritization.
Like community plan updates or like.
The climate action plan update.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be a logical time to do it because we would have fresh information for many, if not all the indicators.
Yeah.
That are baked into the prioritization scoring. Because it would be a large work effort to sort of just do that as a standalone item.
Right. Yeah, it does seem like a lot.
So that relates to my question, is it looked like the inventory was 2016 to 19. When is the next inventory planned and is there a next climate action plan update planned?
Sure, so the current cap was adopted in 2022 as a 2019 calendar year baseline. So that's historic going back to 2016 on the dashboard. That's the current baseline year, 2019. Our current cap calls for a cap update to be completed by the end of calendar year 2027. And so that's our, that's our operating assumption is that we'll do that. We'll have to do some, consideration of the appropriate baseline year for that, just depending on data availability when we get started, the scope of the plan, and that's all stuff we're still kind of, the planning phase on.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. This is awesome. I don't spend enough time with the dashboard, so it's very cool to see it in action. To build off Jamie's point, I think that anything that the city of San Diego does for reducing our emissions is a wildlife positive action, which is what I deal with a little bit, but as a resiliency action, climate change is the biggest threat to anything, including humans that we see on the horizon. So it's all important in terms of the species that we share the city with. So I like the idea that it's not only strategy 5 that the board should be thinking about, which is definitely true. But I'm trying to think of questions that we can ask you that you would be free enough to answer. And I think like, what do you need that the city's not giving you is probably not one that you could answer freely, but can you explain or share with us the feedback or the direct questions or reports that you get from the mayor or the council member about, like, do you give an annual update to the city council? Do you hear from council offices about, I want you to do this because it hits our 3.72214 action? Like how involved and how actionable is this to the mayor's office and the council office?
Sure. I think where to start with that question. Yeah, I'm not sure where to start. I mean, I think the mayor is interested and focused on this. Another major thing that we do as a team that I didn't talk about is we publish an annual report. Every year we're working on that right now for calendar 2024. Hope to get that out in the near future here. You might understand recent events of the city have sort of preoccupied us as a team, and a little bit hard to predict the exact timing of that report. But we do publish that. That report is doing a couple things. It's highlighting the milestones accomplished in the previous year. So it's containing some of the information you see on the dashboard, but sort of in a narrative, report format, telling the story of what happened in the previous calendar year. And then as a companion to that, we also publish our annual greenhouse gas emissions inventory update. So on a similar graph to what you just saw, you can follow emissions on an annual basis over time to see how we're tracking towards emissions reductions, not just those performance targets. Yeah, I guess I don't have anything specific to add about specific interactions except for that, through the current budget process, the council members prepare their, the specific title, they didn't know this is speaking right now, but essentially the priority memos for the budget. And we do see, climate action plan and climate resilience mentioned in those. So if you think it remains a priority. And there's a lot of competition for priorities right now as we go through a difficult budget season. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else specific, honestly, to add to that.
I may just add, I think, you don't have a ton of time to speak to it just because there's so much information, but the department work plans for administrative regulation really meant to help kind of build a governance structure around how do you implement these 180 plus actions and integrate that into the work that departments are doing. We're all mayoral departments, so we're leading the kind of vision of the mayor's office. And I think that was one of the ways that we were really looking at. It's great to have a plan and have a bunch of actions in this big bold vision, but how do you really make that happen? And the department work plans were one of the ways that we were really trying to help departments take that next step and have it be actionable. Obviously, there's other things that need to be in place, such as staff and resources, but I think the department work plans were a big step in that direction.
And maybe if I can just add one more thing that just reminds me of, that it's on the dashboard, I forget the exact number, but 50-something% of the actions are already in progress. Those actions come out of those work plans, which come from the departments, which come from the CAP, which are put into the mayor's budget, they're adopted by the city council in past budget year. So I think in that way, you can see the through line to them. They're being given resources, they have been budgeted. And a lot of progress has been done in the last, couple fiscal years to get to, having more than half in progress and underway.
Okay. Just bring my anything that goes before city council to staff report, and this is just a good thing to note if you're ever looking at something that's going forward to city council. One of the required sections of the staff reports for public awareness and council awareness is how is it supporting implementation of the CAP, so that can be kind of at the forefront of its implementing process.
When the annual report is done, can you send that to us through Julia?
Sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So I appreciate, I think institutionalizing the goals of the CAP in the work plans is the exact way that the city should and did kind of glom onto this or attack it. It's so huge, it's such a huge problem. Every city in the country, every country in the world needs to be constantly pushed from the outside in order to achieve these and find the other third of the greenhouse gas emissions that we need by 2035 that are unspecified. So I come at this, I think, from a bit of or from an advocacy side outside, especially in terms of tidal wetland restoration. And I know that goal is going to take, even if you wanted to do it very, very well, even if we all wanted to do it very, very well, which I'm sure we do, it takes years in order to get all of the permits and the funding and all that kind of stuff. So this whole thing, the CAP and especially goal 5, to reach those goals or to even start those goals, they're in progress, but it takes a whole lot of yelling and screaming and kicking, I think, from outside the city in order to really prioritize and achieve those things, especially because the city's trying to do so many other things. So what are some examples of ways that you have seen the community push on the goals that the city wasn't able to do or wasn't thinking about correctly, the community involvement? Can you just give a little bit more? I appreciate the kind of 4 or 5 things that you already specified about how you're viewing it from inside the city. What else have you heard, or what else do you think would be effective to hear from outside, like from the public, in order to achieve these and get these goals?
I mean, I'm not sure this is what you're thinking of, but I mean, it makes me think of the climate advisory board. So we have that board similar to your board, really charged with an advisory role on CAP implementation. And similar to you all, they have a work plan, they have discussions about focus areas and how they should devote their time and their energy. And they do that. And they're pretty representative group from different knowledge areas and community representation, and that sort of thing. So I think in that way, we see a lot of that activity, and that's really the purpose, one purpose of having that board. And then we also have a more informal climate equity working group So you have a lot of community-based organizations and similar stakeholders coming to those meetings, and there's a lot of, those tend to be more kind of information sharing about what's going on and, under the very broad umbrella of things you could consider climate equity. So a lot of that happens there as well. So I guess to the extent you're not aware of those are two kind of good forums and venues for what you're talking about.
All right, any other comments or questions?
I want to thank you for your presentation. It's very
Yeah, thank you.
detailed.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a ton of information there. It's just really amazing and great to see it.
I'm always happy to talk about caps, so thanks for the opportunity.
All right, so moving on to agenda item number 10, proposed agenda items for future meetings. I know you had some comments.
Yeah, I have two topics for future meetings, both under the energy heading. One is grid resilience. I have a speaker who would participate virtually to make a presentation on what the future of the grid looks like. And for my money, that is one of the most salient and important topics under the heading of resilience. How we control our energy system in the future. The second topic is more directly on energy storage, which was one of the things that was proposed earlier when we were talking about these presentations. And I would propose to do the grid resilience one first in the fall, potentially September or October, with the energy storage one to come in 2026. I don't know whether you want three presentations on the energy theme, more generally putting all three of these under the same heading. My own take is this is a big one for the Resilience Advisory Board to dig into. And might even be a substantial focus for our 2026 work plan. So I'm kind of queuing these things up, thinking that where we understand going into that discussion.
So can I just ask a clarification? So that would be how many in June or just
One in
one in
June.
June?
Making a little series, one in June, which is sort of the built environment piece, wildfire overlay. Grid resilience, because it has such an impact on the future overall in the fall. And then energy storage, because that's a component of what will make the grid resilient.
Why, just wondering why you are separating the grid resilience and energy storage. You think that it needs its own thing?
Yes,
Okay,
because I think that the way the grid is designed and managed is a piece of that, sort of independent of what happens on storage. Storage will be a big component of it, but there's a lot more going on under the resilience piece there. Plus, extraordinarily good speaker.
So Julia, can you remind me for June, that was the resiliency topic as well? Or is-
For grid resilience.
Yeah,
I think it was just, my takeaway was that it was energy.
okay,
And I was driving myself nuts trying to figure out how I was going to do energy in one presentation.
okay.
And so I had a conversation with Cynthia about that. So it came up with this more piecemeal approach.
Got it. Well, part of the reason I asked is, you might have all noticed that there was not a specific other resiliency topic on this one. We kind of had a carryover from the last meeting. I have been talking to the San Diego Food Systems Alliance and potentially about them presenting. They were not able to come today. They are able to come to the June meeting when I have an offer. They said not July. So if of interest, and it sounds like there might be room on the agenda, I could invite them to come to the next meeting.
Interesting.
I think it's really good.
Yeah. Be able to do both of those. Good job.
Are there any other, I guess, I don't know if we necessarily need a motion for either of those things.
No, because Erica was already confirmed for the energy resilience topic.
Earlier.
I guess
Yeah.
we could do a motion for grid system for your resilience topic to be moved to June.
Okay. Just for the record, I will make that motion to have the Food System Alliance presented at the June meeting. Second. All in favor, vote aye. Aye. All right, that motion passes.
I have a couple thoughts on future agenda items. So for July, we do have the info item for biodiverse SD. We don't currently have an information item for June. I think based off of interest of topic areas, there are a couple, and I would need to confirm them with city staff if you agree. But one would be to have our urban forester come and talk about our urban forestry program overall and a couple of the grants that they're implementing for that program. Another would be to have one, I believe right now in General Services Department, come and talk about some of the microgrids projects that the city is leading. So if those are of interest, I can reach out to staff and see who has availability. If they're not available for June, we could look for maybe them to come in July or later the year.
It might be good to partner the microgrid presentation that I was gonna set up for September or October. This discussion, I'm hoping will tell me which one I can invite him to, with that city microgrid presentation as well.
We could do the fall for that. And then another thought for an info item would be to have someone come and talk about our natural resource management plans. Those are led by our Park and Recreation Department. They're a little bit, I would say, more dialed in and focused on how we're managing some of our open space areas.
It's one of the, sorry. That's one of the opposite.
Go ahead.
The natural resource management plans, I was just reminded while looking at Andrew's presentation that they're one of the strategy 5 goals. Or way to implement the goals is to include sequestration in our MPs. So that'd be very interesting. I know the city staff is way behind in resource plans too. So that would be great soapbox.
I'll reach out to staff. If there's a motion to approve that, I'll reach out to staff.
Okay,
What's the one for, did you give a month for those ones? Or you're gonna ask them?
Going to ask availability, would be looking for one to come in June, either urban forestry or on our natural resource management plans, pending staff availability.
my comment on the urban forestry master plans, kind of building on Andrew's presentation. It seems that strategy 5.2 is a very big one, talks about street tree master plan. It looked like 5 to 6 million a year should be allocated towards that. But also looked like a lot of trees were getting planted, so I think it'd be interesting if we're having that presentation as how it relates back to that CAP strategy.
And then one other thought, well, I guess, is there a motion? Do you need to approve?
You said June, so June is the Food Systems Alliance.
For resilience topics, there's the Food Systems Alliance from Eric, and then energy resilience from.
I was thinking that'd be September. Oh, June, yeah.
June.
That's gonna be the building codes and
Building codes.
wildfire resilience.
So that'll be 3 presentations.
Maybe 3 reasons.
It was last time, but.
Yeah,
Give it to.
So I guess my question is, July is gonna be the water. One that I'm planning, and then what else is in July?
Biodiversity.
Okay. I don't know, if we keep the time, we could probably do 3, we just have to be careful. I
Yeah,
hate to have someone come and present and then not get the opportunity.
I don't think 3, if we keep it focused, is too much. But
Probably no other items though.
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah,
my advice.
Yeah. My final suggestion for you all to think about is if per your work plan, you're planning on having your annual report go to MA committee in October. you are on recess in August. It seems like it's far off. It will come up quickly, and so that might be something that you want to have initial discussions on, perhaps in July, if you're going to set up a subcommittee, establish that in July, so that work can be done on it. Drafting it maybe in August before the September meeting, and in the September meeting that you're kind of finalizing those recommendations. For October, because then it has to get routed to the environment committee.
It's a good point, I think that should, to your point, Julia, we should be thinking about which presentations we want to prioritize, knowing that timeline. In order to inform those recommendations, so I'm not saying what we have right now outlined is good or bad, I'm saying as far as group awareness goes.
So I think we need a motion to approve the recommendations from Julia on, we're talking about urban forestry in June.
Potentially either urban forestry or natural resource management plans pending staff availability for the June meeting.
Do we have a motion for that?
I motion to have either of those presentations in June, pending staff availability.
Do we have a second? We have a second. Any discussion? Please vote. All members pass. And then I'll make a motion that we added an agenda item in the July meeting to talk about our annual report to the Environment Committee. How many presentations now?
Right, 17.
For July, you have two presentations, Jamie's resilience topic, biodiversity. And then an agenda item to talk about the annual report, so I think that works.
All right, I would need a second for the motion.
Second.
Okay. Seconded, any discussion? Please vote.
Aye.
Okay. That's probably plenty of future items for now. But does anybody else have any discussion?
I would like to know if we have a preference for which day we want to do microgrid day. Grid resilience,
Which month you?
September or October. Maybe it ought to be September, given what's just been said about analyzing. Well, maybe it ought to be October, because then it will already have gone to the environment committee. Okay. Is there any issue in any of that? Because I will set it up. Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks, Sean.
October.
Did you say that maybe it should be October because in September we'll be talking about the
Yeah.
plan?
Yeah.
100% of the time. Yeah, okay.
Right, well then, if you want to invite the appropriate city personnel for that October one as well.
Yes.
All right. Okay, then I think our last item is adjournment. Thank you, everybody. We made it.
Without Cynthia. We thought we'd be here.
I didn't think you could do it, Aaron.
Look at us.